And we all know carbs can taste great and it makes you want to get more. Carbs are so moreish. Hey everybody, Jason Davis here at Body Remastered Coaching. We want to cover today, and this is going to be probably 3 parts because of its complexity, and that's carbs, carbohydrates, and how it can be really managed from a nutrition standpoint for those suffering from diabetes or those at risk of diabetes. Now, carbs has always been the big area of focus when it comes to diabetes, and it should be, but remember, carbohydrates are a macronutrient. They shouldn't be looked at as an enemy. However, you need to control it because it can give you unwanted fat gain. Well, let's get straight to it. There's a few things about carbs first I want you to know. You don't have to be an expert, but it's really important to know, and it helps you in managing your own nutrition. First of all, they provide 4 calories per gram. Okay. Secondly, it's a primary sugar that circulates our body in the form of blood glucose, and it also gets stored in our liver and our muscles as glycogen. It gets converted into glycogen. Carbs provide a really important source of fibre. That's important for gut health. Excess calories from carbs is likely to put on unwanted fat gain. And remember, carbs low in fibre don't tend to fill us up that for very long, like protein and fat. So the chances are certain carbs, you eat it and you feel hungry pretty quickly after. And we all know carbs can taste great and it makes you want to get more. Carbs are so moreish. What does this mean if you have diabetes? Or maybe if you're at risk of diabetes? Well, there's a few facts here. First of all, if you increase your carb loading, so if you have carbs, it will increase your blood glucose levels. It will cause a rise in blood glucose. Low carb diets can be really useful for diabetics. It can reduce the amount of medication that you need, improve your glycaemic control. But this is mainly true for inactive people. Okay? It's not quite the same if you are incorporating exercise, important exercise, and resistance training, because carbs are an important energy source for training. And of course, if your carb consumption is too low and you're an active person and you train 3 or 4 times a week, you run the risk of certainly reducing your performance during exercise. You'll be too fatigued, you won't be able to carry out the exercise, or you run the risk of a hypoglycemic attack where your blood glucose level falls too much. And of course, carbohydrate counting is a really important strategy for people suffering from diabetes, especially type 1. Is going to be key. And also what they call periodization, which ultimately is having carbs at the right time depending on training levels and activity levels. Now, of course, there are different types of carbs and carbohydrate structures. There's simple carbs, which can be single sugars or double sugars, and there's also more complex carbs which involve a chain of carbs. Now, I'm not going to give you a science lesson because some of this is not going to be really useful when you build a new nutrition program. But I will say, if you compare simple to complex carbohydrates, often most people say, well, complex are more superior in helping you get to your goals. But do not eliminate simple carbs from your diet because they play a really important part as well. They both play a part overall. Simple carbs could be really important when it comes to getting quick energy for training or just after training, and also treating a hypoglycemic attack if you're diabetic. So it really is making sure that you build a proper plan that includes both types of carbohydrates. So a few more facts about carbohydrates. The fact is, first of all, once you consume carbs, you digest it and you absorb it, and your body uses it as fuel, as energy ultimately, or it will be stored in the liver or in the muscle cells. Remember, if there's fibre in your carbs, they don't get absorbed or assimilated, and most of it stays intact within the intestines for healthy gut bacteria to start devouring it. That can bring a lot of benefits overall. This is why it's important to have enough fibre in your diet, and that's why you shouldn't cut out carbs completely, and you should be careful when you have too much of a low carb diet because of the health benefits you get from fibre. That is if you don't suffer from irritable bowel syndrome or issues where you just cannot get fibre through the body. And of course, as you eat carbs, the amount of carbs you eat in terms of the sugar in the bloodstream is usually similar to the amount of insulin that is actually released by the body. The insulin is released in order to combat and control the glucose levels. It targets receptors within the muscle cells to uptake that glucose. Now, of course, if you have diabetes, type 1 or type 2, there's a disarrangement in the way in which insulin is actually produced, in terms of it actually absorbing glucose into the cells, or you just don't secrete insulin in the first place. So let me cover first the advantages of having a lower carb diet, just reducing the amount of carbs in your diet when it comes to diabetes. First of all, if you reduce the amount of carbs, it will reduce the blood glucose levels and also reduce the risk of a hyperglycemic attack or hyperglycemia in general. Remember, it's all about glycemic control, and it's universally accepted that carbs have the biggest impact on blood glucose levels. When you eat carbs, your blood glucose levels rise. And so managing that and stabilising that for a lower carb diet will improve your glucose control and ultimately your HbA1c, which is your average glucose control over time. The second one is reducing your carb intake will likely reduce your calorie intake. And the lower calorie intake will mean you have better control of your fat and not getting obese. Remember, there's a very strong link between insulin resistance over time and obesity. And remember, refined carbohydrates fill you up far less than fat and protein does. And we spoke about this in the last video in terms of protein. It doesn't control your appetite as well. The chances are you will overeat on refined carbohydrates. Just think about that delicious pizza you get out of the oven. It fills you up temporarily, but then you have the hunger for more, or it makes you feel extremely sluggish as well. So it's really important by reducing your carb intake, you're actually in the long term reducing the amount of calories that you're intaking, because you're less likely to snack later on. Remember, not everybody with diabetes wants to lose weight. Some people want to actually either gain weight or actually maintain what they have. And having a low carb diet, maybe 20% of your overall macronutrient intake, is also great for just general glycemic control and stabilising your blood glucose levels. Especially if you're inactive, because it will just make sure that it's controlled over time. And as you decrease the amount of carbs in your diet, and over time, this is likely to decrease the amount of medication you need, whether that's injectable insulin or other forms of medication, because your body just doesn't need to signal the release and use of insulin as often. Remember, a low carb diet is going to require less insulin, so there's less chance of hypoglycemia, which requires the unnecessary consumption of more calories and more chances of fat gain. Reducing your carbohydrate intake will also have an impact on hyperglycemic attacks post meals. Just think about it. If my meal contains more carbs, so I get 20 grams of carbs compared to a meal that contains 10 grams of fat and 10 grams of protein, which one's likely to increase my blood glucose levels post meal and potentially lead to a hyperglycemic attack? It's going to be the one with the carbs, 20 grams of carbs, because its effect relates to a rise in blood glucose levels. And remember, if hyperglycemia is not controlled adequately and you get infrequent bouts of it, then this can lead to serious health conditions and complications with diabetes. And that's why, again, a low carb diet can really support in preventing and getting to those situations. Now, does this mean you should just stop eating carbs or have carbs to very, very minimal and everything will be sorted? Not quite. Because carbs, as I said, are a macronutrient. They're important and they contain fibre as well. And there are some really important carbs. And there is a complication as well. We would never advocate for just sorting out your nutrition. It's important that you incorporate exercise and activity as well. And especially if you are doing resistance training and building some muscle, which can also have a great effect on diabetes control, you're going to need some carbs in order to get the energy that you need before, after, or even during training. So watch out for the next video, because we're going to cover how to manage carb loading during and after training for a diabetic, and also the advantages of carbs, and therefore ultimately what's the best program in terms of carb management when it comes to diabetes. Because sure, lowering your carbs will have a major benefit. However, doing it to the extreme is not likely to give you the results you want. It's universally accepted that the best diet, the best plan is one that you can stick to for the rest of your life. And that is what we believe in Body Remastered. So low carb can definitely play a part of that, but it's not the full story. So wait out for the next video and we'll chat about how you can really manage carbs and also its advantages when it comes to training. As always guys, I'm not a medical professional. All of this is for advice and for education purposes and to really help you on your journey. But make sure you consult with your doctor if you're going to be changing anything significant in your diet with respect to carbs. Thanks very much. I hope everybody's well. Please like or subscribe to the video if you want to hear more. I look forward to speaking to you about carbs in the next video. Cheers. Bye.